What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Canescast. I'm Phil Van Pelt. I should really be welcoming myself back to Canescast because I haven't been on in a while. But I'm excited to dissect what has been a very disappointing season so far and get back in the swing of things with old Garrett here.
What's up, everyone? Yeah, just like Phil, last time I shot and did the episode, I was in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm back here in hometown of Billings, Montana. So I apologize I wasn't here the last couple of weeks to get the episodes out, but like Phil said, life's been pretty crazy the last few weeks, as well as the Canes have been a huge letdown. So welcome back. Thanks again if you're tuning in. And we're excited to talk about what we have seen and what we hope to see going forward.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And the reason, obviously, I'm Miami across the board with all my teams. I don't know. You guys probably know that from the beginning episodes. Garrett definitely knows that, and I can just say thank goodness for my Dolphins being a solid squad this year because at least there's good football being played in Miami. But other than that, I am very very disappointed. We talk about this a lot, Garrett, as far as what the expectations were coming in. They were high, and now we're looking at what I thought could be a successful season, a 9-10 win season. Like I said at the beginning, I wasn't quite as um exuberant or got carried quite as carried away, I should say, with my predictions as you did. But
We're a long way from 12-0. That is for sure.
we are, and I thought that again the season could still be good, but it turns out this ends up being what I guess needs to be a complete and total rebuild, tear down, something like we've seen, at Florida State recently and, Georgia with Kirby Smart. Guys kind of tearing things down. Now, was it this bad at Florida State? Yes. Here, no, we didn't expect anything like this. These rebuilds happen. They take place in college football all the time. Those recruits that we thought, guys that we had that were talented, obviously do not fit what Cristobal wants to do. There will be carryover from this season as far as the injuries that we've had. They've been vast. So it'll be nice to have upperclassmen that are buying into this system return, coupled with new recruits, coupled with young guys that are getting playing time to actually start to create some depth and build in the image that Cristobal wants us to be. I'm excited for that, but that's really it because right now this season has not been anything. So we're looking at the silver linings. I'm pumped about Cristobal with the recruiting class that he's still been able to lock down with the number 2 prospect, that the corner who's the number 2 prospect overall, the number 1 corner, and then Francis Magoa, the offensive tackle recruit. Those guys locking down and saying that they're still bought in. That's huge. To keep a recruiting class respectable, especially when everything is as bad as it's been on the field. To keep a recruiting class like this, and that'll help more recruits. I'm excited for that. Other than that, we've dissected that a bunch. What are your thoughts right now? Because what we saw on the field to me against Florida State was a team that just completely there was no energy. There was no energy. It's a team that quit.
That's what I've got to say. Is the thing we have to look forward to for the rest of the season is Jacurri Brown going to be the quarterback the rest of this year? Is he also going to be the quarterback for this season's, 2, 3 of the crystal ball era? If we are going to see those, of course, because this is a tough way to start. You don't have a bare roster. There was a talented receiver room. Tyler Van Dyke had a lot of hype coming in, so you had a good quarterback room. You thought you had aging offensive linemen, so it wasn't like we were starting freshman tackles on the right and the left like we were 3 years ago. There was
Injuries,
guys that have
injuries
proven
though.
there was guys that have proven that they can make plays. The tight end room being one of those. So this is a big let down for the first season, of course. I wasn't the only one that had, expectations where they would have been not just a winning team this year, but a competitive team where we could have possibly been in the hunt for the ACC championship at the end of the year. I just felt like if we were going to win those games early, the momentum of those early wins, and then the way that teams generally will get on a roll, why would we lose the rest of this year? I feel not a whole lot differently from every game we've played outside of the Florida State game. It got way out of hand. We've been in every game. So it's not like if the things were going to bounce our way and go right like they tend to do, you could have been certainly more competitive. I wouldn't say 12-0 or we would be undefeated, but certainly we could have been still having a good enough season. So that's obviously not the way things are going to go the rest of the year. This is going to be a start from scratch. We got to find out if this guy can play a whole game. I think they need to turn it over, give him the ball, let him play every snap, and unless he gets hurt or otherwise can't perform, he's got to be the guy that's got to learn on the fly a little bit now. It's a little early for having to go out there and be the guy in your true freshman year. I'm a big mobile quarterback fan. I've said to Phil several times, I think this guy. I'm not saying he's anybody. Let's just get that out of the open first. But having seen teams in the past go this route, we could certainly be looking at a very successful quarterback. But generally, they have gotten a redshirt year, or this isn't their true freshman season. They've generally gotten a year to sit on the shelf, get a little time to learn, and then come in, be the guy the next year after a good competition quarterback wise in the spring, stuff like that. So that's what we got to look forward to. Is Jacurri Brown going to be the quarterback next year? And I think in the next couple of years after that, that's the big thing for me to look forward to.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because you've kind of spun me that direction. I agree that he is the future. I will say we were all excited when Jake Garcia committed. We were all excited on what that could be. It was a quarterback room that went from no depth to all of a sudden we got multiple high 4 stars, potentially 5-star guys coming down the pipeline here that could be the guy coming, in the future. And Van Dyke was not necessarily the one that we thought would be the guy, and he was, and he killed it last year. Now the offense changed. Does it fit what he does well? Okay. It's, not really, but at the same time, injuries have played a big part in that. We know Van Dyke's not exactly mobile. He's not Brad Kaya, but he isn't exactly mobile. We've seen him make plays with his feet, but the thing with Van Dyke is he can feel the pressure and go through his progressions. For me personally, when I'm seeing Garcia is not going through any progressions. So when you take this game against Florida State, that two-headed monster, the little two-headed quarterback room that they're trying to run, the first possession, we came right down the field, got points. It worked. It worked to an extent, right? Because we were in that game, and there's still an argument to be made that a couple more plays go our way. You could stay in that game, but then Van Dyke gets hurt. They go back to Garcia. All that Garcia has really been good for, to me, has been turning the ball over. Now, like we talked about, hindsight's 2020, but I do believe that had you known, you went, if you had gone with Brown in the beginning, we'd be in a much better position now because of the injuries on the offensive line. His ability to escape and make things happen keeps plays alive and keeps us in football games. Would he have made mistakes? Yes. No player's perfect. Every quarterback, doesn't matter who you are. Trevor Lawrence in college, Tua in college, Tim Tebow in college, Andrew Luck. Everybody makes mistakes and has bad games. Joe Burrow, it's part of it. But this guy gives you something that, and we talked about that possession in the end zone, that nobody else on the team gives you. And De'Aaron King and Malik Rozier are the only two examples you can really go to in Miami football history that were truly mobile quarterbacks. Like I told you, we were talking about it earlier. Malik Rozier was more of a Jalen Hurts type runner, a powerful runner, but not fast. De'Aaron King was more of obviously a quick, fast guy, but he didn't have the size. Brown's the first guy in a while that on the surface, you say, this guy checks all these boxes and he can fly. So give him an opportunity to grow. Garcia, to me, I understand in the beginning when Van Dyke got hurt because you're working with a playbook. Does this guy know the playbook yet? Does he have it in full? Probably not. So I understand Garcia. But outside of a couple plays against Middle Tennessee and the one really big play against Duke after half, he's shown you nothing except turning the ball over. And pulling him from positions, pulling him from opportunities, Jacurri Brown, when he comes in and he's handing the ball off and running on first and second down, and then all Garcia does is come in and throw an interception, that does nothing but kill morale for the team, and that hurts to me, and it hurts his potential to just have that rep. All these reps are crucial. So I 100% agree. Let this guy play it out. Let this guy see what he's got. Because unless someone gets injured, there's no reason right now. Could Garcia be good in the future? Yeah, he can be. He was a high recruit for a reason, but there's something missing, and the guy is not. I told you on the phone, that play in the end zone that Brown gets out of, he gets out of the tackle, and then he freaking bombs that ball downfield. If that's Van Dyke tries to get rid of it, but he maybe takes a safety because he can't, he's not mobile. If that's Garcia, That's a strip sack. And if it's not a safety, it's a touchdown. Brown gives you the opportunity to keep the play alive and get rid of it and actually do something and avoid the horrible play in that moment. And the one big mistake you could talk about that happened with him was the fumble, but that was on the center. So give this guy an opportunity to play. He's the guy next year to me if Van Dyke doesn't come back. And the only reason there's an argument for Van Dyke, I would say, I think Van Dyke is a prototypical, he can be a great pro quarterback. If the offensive line gets retooled with guys coming back, they stay healthy, and with transfers and incoming recruits, that next step could build for a successful year for Van Dyke. But I think it's Van Dyke. If he decides to be part of the equation, he will be, because obviously Cristobal loves him. Or Jacurri Brown. I think right now you're looking at it and saying that Garcia's got to be the odd man out, because he's done nothing to show he should be on the field unless there's an injury and Van Dyke's not available to play in reserve from his injury behind Brown. So you got to roll Brown. You got to see what this guy can do. He gives us a threat that we haven't had in a while. So he was a big recruit for a reason. His number would have been called. It's just called sooner than later. So give the guy a shot, throw him out there, see what he's got, and let him play a full game. Stop pulling him in moments where you're instilling that you don't trust his arm. Anyone could have thrown that. You could have pulled anyone out of that stadium on third down after you let him hand the ball off and run on first and second just to throw an interception like Garcia did. Anyone could have done that. He could have done that. We would have been better off for it, because at least it would have been a rep for him. So far, Garcia has shown you nothing but turnovers. I don't get the obsession with going back to him personally. I know it's a playbook thing. That's it. But
Yeah, at this point, you got to go ahead and give a guy that's shown potential to come in on third down, or he started by coming in on the goal line because we couldn't get in inside the 20. So you've really essentially put him in the hardest situation in his games, all the games he's played, right? Why is it so hard to say, I'll trust you to, on first and second down, throw the ball? That's the big detriment that they will face if they continue to go this route, which we really don't know. We're shooting this thing on Tuesday. Cristobal hasn't said, a confirmed starter. So we're all totally in, we could be in La La Land here. We're just, this is the only thing we really can talk about in this case, at seeing what we've seen so far. So to me, that's where we are at. At this point, you got to let the guy throw the ball downfield. He's got to, on third downs, or like we said on the phone, why on fourth down? Can't you chuck the ball downfield 40 yards and let the guy go up, and he's either going to come down with the ball, get a penalty, or he'll turn the ball over. Teach him how to tackle the guy right in front of him. That's better than the punt that we had, unfortunately, from Headley coming out of the end zone that time. So you got to open the playbook up, give this kid some opportunity. You have nothing to lose. You should let this kid play as free as possible now, because there's nobody playing behind you. You're not going to get the hook. What we have to do is empower this kid now. He looks the part. When he's standing behind, you finally look and you're like, wow, what looks so peculiar about this? Well, the guy's 6'4", he's 215 pounds. He looks like a big kid. He's got good feet. Let's see what he can do. I'm not saying we have to throw the ball 40 times, but if we're gonna continue to only allow him to give that one read and then go, or just quarterback draw on third down, people are going to start getting aware of that. We need to be ahead of that. He needs to be able to throw the ball downfield, make mistakes, play free and loose. That's the only thing that we can really say we have to look forward to as far as I'm concerned, because I am excited for that player. I'm excited for Skinner. As soon as that guy gets a little time to get his hands on the ball and catch the dang thing, I think he's going to be a good player. Depending on how many of our receivers stick around through this, because I think what we will face is you're not going to throw the ball enough for me. We're going to have a hard time maybe in recruiting that way, but I think that's the best thing about college football now. There's a revolving carousel. Find players that have a need for opportunity. It's a great place to play. You don't have to focus so much on recruiting and letting things blow up in that regard anymore, right? I think we've gone out and done a pretty good job of getting those guys. I think another thing we need to do is start playing guys in other positions. I think, Tyreek Stevenson needs to move from corner to safety and play right next to Cam Kitchens. I think we've got two good, physical, fast enough defensive backs. They're out of position, in my opinion. Cam Kitchens needs to have a guy he can trust right next to him. Stevenson's shown me several times where he'll allow to get beat deep. So put him inside. Play him where his strengths are, coming downfield, making tackles. He can tackle. Kitchens can tackle, can make plays on the ball. Get those guys where their focus is not trying to turn and run, Stevenson. So James Williams needs to move down into the box. He's a great player. As soon as he grows big enough, he will outgrow a safety position. He's not going to be able to play that in 4, 5, 6 years. Get in the box now. I think I've seen them do it. They're kicking Leonard Taylor out a little bit farther. They tried to do this 2-man front and then spy on Florida State, but we got countered to death. So I think he needs to slide outside to be Messidor on one end. You got Leonard Taylor on the other end. They're going to be bigger ends. We don't have necessarily speed rushing from your defensive ends, but now you have put Jackson and for now Harrison Hunt inside and get those two as your 4 down linemen, but spread them out. Get Taylor out of the nose tackle. And then again, you got to find 2, 3 linebackers that can run and play. I think Jafari Harvey, I've seen several films where they have him dropping back in the coverage. So you're already a strong side linebacker there. Come down and get the 5th rush going on. But unfortunately, Corey Flagg, in my opinion, could be the other linebacker, but we got to get James Williams next to him. The two of those guys, maybe we got something. There's things to be done on this team. There's great talent. These guys will end up in those positions in the pros. That's why I'm saying, why not play them there now? At least get these movements made now that may save your season, and also play these guys as strength. Because right now we're grasping at straws as far as I'm concerned.
And I agree with that. My one issue I will say with the lack of a punt thing when you're throwing out of your own end zone, at that point the game is there. The game is still in a different situation from being over. It's not over at that point. I know what you mean.
I definitely think in those cases where we're down 4 possessions later in the game, I mean, start chucking the ball down the field. What do you have to lose? Why throw the interception that gets a 40-yard turnover the last possession of the game? Get those things done earlier in the games for sure, right?
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean, but I don't know what the message that sends to the team as far as, hey, screw it. We're just going for it every time. We have no shots, so let's just chuck it. I understand the mindset behind that, but at the same time, there's a time and a place for it. I don't necessarily know that going for that earlier. And again, hindsight is 2020. So it's easy to say that now and look back at how the game ended and go, well, let's take those shots and it doesn't matter. Let him make the mistakes. Yes, that's important. Just keep him out. Why pull him on a passing down? And also my biggest beef is I told you, stop running on 1st and 2nd. Let him throw the ball on 1st and 2nd down sometimes. And then run the ball.
He's got to be able to play to his full talent. Like you can't, again, defenses were starting to crash their corners and their linebackers down on him because they know he's either going to keep the ball or two options.
Like he's got
to be able to read. He's got to read. He's the perfect player to play the offense they've been playing all freaking year because he can actually throw, he can actually be a threat to keep the ball and go around the other end. So that's what I'm for sure.
My biggest thing is obviously, and I hate this about for such an explosive player, I've said it for years now. Obviously, it's only been a few years with this now, last year and everything else too. Right? But Jalen Knighton loves to put the ball on the ground, and his fumble cost us that game against North Carolina. We know that. But he's an explosive player. The year before, he killed North Carolina. He had one of the nastiest jukes I've seen in recent memory in that game when he took that 60-yard swing pass to the house. He was just, he is lightning quick. And when you have him on the field with Brown, it just presents problems when you're talking about who. So I think those two in particular can work really, really well together because you're worried if we don't pick this correctly as the defense, this play is going for 30
it could
yards.
Go for 40.
And we saw it go right up the
our
middle.
Longest play, exactly. Our longest play of the year is finally when you have a threat on the quarterback, the lanes open up in the middle of the field for a guy to not just run into the wall all the time. So
true, and I think Henry Parrish is a great back. I think Henry Parrish can go to that as well. I do. But the
quarterback being a threat in that position makes the running game on a whole work better. Because
it does, of course.
Like the example is when the Roosters running into a wall for 8 games in a row, but now finally a guy comes in and the holes open up because it's the same guys, it's the same thing. But the threat of the quarterback keeping the ball makes that hole open up in the middle. Finally, finally.
Biggest thing with that is that's in spite of all the injuries that we've had. It's in spite of all the injuries that we've had that was still able to happen on the offensive line. So you're presenting a better opportunity for your team in a tough situation because you're making the best out of something. My biggest beef with Cristobal, and we've talked about this, is I understand he needs his guys, his stuff to run his system the way he wants to run it. Every coach has that. Makes sense. They have a system they want to run. But we saw this, and I've said this for years about the NFL, is there's a lot of quarterbacks that have come into the NFL that weren't successful because they were forced into a scheme that wasn't their own. They were forced into a scheme that didn't fit to their strengths. And that matters for every player. Receivers, corner, there's defensive schemes. There's things that matter for every single player. We watched Nnamdi Asomugha be killer for the Raiders for years. He goes to the Eagles. He's not the same player. Different scheme, doesn't fit his strengths. Guy was the number one corner in football, and then all of a sudden he was hardly rosterable. So for me, quarterbacks just have the ball every single possession, right? They touch the ball the most. So you got to fit to what works. And that's been my issue is instead of taking that, it's ramming this into a spot until it finally fits what works. So my question is, are they going to do that? Are they going to, you're talking about fitting players where you think that they're playing out of position. I don't know that we're going to see that. I think after an off season of, being introspective and looking back and going, looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, well, what can we do better? How do we put our players in position to succeed? I think that'll help. But I also think, and talk about salvaging the season is what it is. Do we want to make a bowl game? Yeah. Do we think we're going to make a bowl game? I'm not sure. And when you can look at games like losing to North Carolina when we had them dead to rights and then not showing up against Duke or Middle Tennessee, those will hurt you. Those games will hurt you. So, and obviously, like I said, Roosters fumble. But do we have any belief that Cristobal and this coaching staff is going to put these guys in that? Or is it just going to be like, you don't have the mentality that we want. It's smash mouth, Big Ten football that Josh Gaddis is coaching, a big time offensive lineman that we have in places with injuries that's decimated. You're starting to recruit these. That's the recruiting part that I'm so excited for. Look at Oregon's offensive line. He left them in a phenomenal position at Oregon. So that's what we want to get to. And then with that smash mouth football comes out. We have young receivers that are only going to get better. All that stuff matters. But what we're looking at is a team that's going to go, a lot of these guys are going to fly out. They're going to have guys that either fit the system, and if they fit the system or they feel like they want to change, they'll stay. That is going to be coupled with new transfers, new recruits, and depth guys that are coming back from injuries that think that, and we'll see a different team next year. But I don't know that I agree with what you're saying, and we can say it all we want. I just don't know that it's going to happen. I just don't know that we're going to see these guys moved around unless there's a change of heart, because Cristobal's model will work. It worked at Oregon. He had success. He won the Pac-12. He's not a bad coach, and he's a phenomenal recruiter. Very few people in the country are as good at recruiting, and that's huge for us. I understand how important the transfer portal is now and everything else, but that is still huge to get these guys and set the foundation to be good for a long time. It's one in the trenches. That's what he's trying to do, but he's stuck in his ways that this is the way you win. And I will give Diaz that credit. I'm happy that he's gone. And I think if the seasons are the same, the future's a lot more bleak with Diaz at the helm, just because he's not the recruiter that Cristobal is. Everything else the same. It's night and day, where the recruiting class we still have is like top 6. We're not top 10. We're not top 50 if Diaz is still the head coach, if we have the same season. Now, does he put them in a different position? Does he bring in a different offensive coordinator that runs more like what Rhett Lashley ran, what we think we should be running, that up-tempo stuff, because we don't have Georgia and Alabama's offensive line or Oregon's offensive line yet. We don't have that. When we do, this offense will work. But there's that argument. Is this successful? But if all things created equal, everything's a lot worse if Diaz is still head coach. But I'm just worried that another year of this, and we're not going to see Cristobal very much longer, because next year, whether we make a bowl game or not, whatever, it's your first year. You can write it off and say it's fine. We'll move on. It's a complete rebuild, but the patience isn't there for any of the fans, because we've dealt with this long enough, and the expectation is championship in Miami. And until the U is back, is the U back? The U is back for anybody that's a real Hurricane fan. The U is back when we're competing for championships, because that's what the expectation is and always has been for the fans, for the alumni, the boosters, everything. And the recommitment to the football program and sports in general. I mean, look, basketball, just Elite 8. Baseball team's always great. Football, despite that, is the sport of the university. That's a football school at its core. If he's not winning, the recommitment shows me that if he has another year like this, despite the recruiting, the fire on the seat's hot, man. And all of a sudden, excuse me, all of a sudden, if he doesn't win in his third year, he's gone. If he has another season like this, third year's the axe. If he doesn't finish with a solid winning record, it has to be improvements, and he'll be fine. Without that, it'll be another guy because the commitment is shown, I think, from the guys from the university and the boosters and stuff that they want to see a winning product. And if he doesn't do it, someone else will take the pieces he recruited and did it for him, and do it for him. So I do believe that, but I don't want to completely mail in faith on Cristobal. I'm just saying, as bad as the season has been so far, despite all the injuries and despite all this stuff, and there's two sides of this. Cristobal's been a letdown, or he doesn't have his guys. There's two sides of the argument that are really summed up in those two things. And despite how you feel, this season has gone nowhere the way we need it to be, or what anybody thought. And it is unacceptable at the end of the day. And if it continues, it's not going to be good. But for Cristobal, university will move on, in my opinion. But he's got to get it going, because a lot of these losses, I don't care where you are, there's not a situation in any of the multiverses where you go any kind of anything that we could say where Miami loses to Middle Tennessee and Duke in the same year. There's just not. There's not. It's pathetic. That's not what it is.
Yeah, I have to say, and that's a product of being not on the right scheme. You know, I've said for a lot of times that's why this should have been the way we have gone program wise years ago. We gave, like you said, we gave it a shot with Malik Rozier. I think Malik Rozier really won that job out of, there wasn't really any other options at that point. I don't necessarily think they, as a program, they committed to him. I got to give Mark Richt a lot of credit now, because to have the season that they had that year with Malik Rozier, I mean, we beat Florida State. We went and crushed Notre Dame, who was having a great year, you know? So
and Virginia Tech was top 15 or something.
I gotta say, I appreciate the job that Mark Richt did more and more now as we go along, because I don't think he had recruited an athletic guy. I think he just happened to have, that's what we had in the cupboard. And then that it kind of saw, hey, this is kind of going to work. That's where, you know, D.R. King came along, and I was excited at that time because I thought he was an athlete. You know, he could have done the things that I've been looking for. He did. Let's not kid ourselves. There were some games and some flashes and some highlights where he did do those things. I just think, like, this is finally the time. Get a guy that's the part. I'm not saying Cam Newton. I'm not saying Justin Fields, but start looking at what has had a success recently. Let's not kid ourselves. This whole drop back quarterback thing hasn't. I can't think of a guy outside of Andrew Luck, but even he was a guy that was still threatening the field with his legs, right? That's the game. That's all the guys that have had success recently have gone to this model. Why we've been so stubborn and waited around so long, I have no idea. But let's find out. Let's finally find out if we got that guy on the roster this year. If he's not on the roster this year, we need to find that in the offseason. I think if Brown is the guy, like you said, the timeline will be there because he's going to take some lumps. The next 3 games of this year, and possibly if you get a bowl game, are all about getting him experience and learning how to win a game. Next year in the offseason, if he's the guy, you found him, get him ready. Next year, you're going to have an 8-4 season. It's going to be still some tough losses. He'll play poorly sometimes, but you will be at least by then making the strides where he can be trusted with the full playbook by then. You know, he'll be able to do the things most quarterbacks can do once they've really had time and have been developed right. By the 3rd year, he better be competitive, and you better have found that guy. Because if, like you said, I think you have another season like this, which the clock is ticking. If you don't have the guy on the roster, then it's going to start off next year. You're really behind. So I pray, if I'm Mario Cristobal, that Brown is capable of taking this team and going at the reins, because if he's not, I think what you said is perfect. He's already 4 games behind next year. He's going to find those 4 games out next year, which is going to be unfortunate. Another crappy season. So I think the clock's ticking. Jacurri Brown, are you the guy? That's what I want to find out.
And I agree. Again, I agree with that 100%. And imagine this, a guy that's mobile and you have a great offensive line. Go figure. Wow. The one time the offensive line gives up something, a pressure, then or the fleeting moments because the offensive line is dominant eventually. If we talk about like old school Miami offensive lines and what we know Cristobal can recruit, then oh wow, what a novel idea. It makes it even harder to bring the quarterback down because not only do you have a great line, then you have a guy that can get away from it if it's not. Is he going to take sacks? Is he going to make mistakes? Is he going to fumble? Yes, that's every quarterback. But you just increase your odds of that stuff not happening. So all it is now, like you said, is the future. Let's see how we can build this up and continue to see what we have this year. And it's big reps for the receivers to continue to improve and gain that chemistry with him as well as the running backs,
Exactly.
offensive line.
Exactly.
With that, guys, we're running a little short on our time here. So I'm gonna call this episode of Canescast a wrap. A lot of unfortunately what ifs that we didn't want to have. We thought we'd be having a much different conversation right now about what we're looking forward to in this potential trap game against Georgia Tech before we play a big one against Clemson to see what our season could be. No, didn't happen that way. But hey, there's always a reason. That's what's great about being a sports fan. You can find some kind of positive narrative. And for us, it's, hey, we might have the guy right in front of us and the recruiting class is still bomb. It's 1 year. Let's see what we can do with Cristobal is at the helm. Let's see what he can do at the helm coming down the pipe. But these losses have made the clock tick faster, as you said. But with Canes Cast, I'm Phil Van Pelt.
Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. I'm Garrett Halsey. We'll see you next time. It's all about the U.
All about the U, man. Despite the struggles, go Canes as always. And it's going to be a great basketball season. We know that. So I'm pumped.